Parsha Shelach, right, which is just as an overview. This is the parsha where the Jewish people are about to enter into the land of Israel, and they come to a startling revelation to themselves that it might not be so easy. Right, and here we are. We've been spending all this time in the desert, right, and we're going to go to the land of Israel, and you know what? Maybe it's not going to be as simple as we think. Maybe just because Hashem says that He's letting us inherit the land, but we're going to go into the land, and there's all these people who live there, and they're not going to want to leave so fast. And maybe they're stronger than us, and maybe there's more of them than us, and we should be prepared. So this, in and of itself, is already a flaw. Because if God says, I'm going to bring you to the land, and you're going to inherit the land, He's not going to allow some other nation to make it so it doesn't happen. Right? He's going to go and make it happen. So just by virtue of the fact that Hashem promised that we would have the land, there should have been no reason to worry and to send spies. Because Hashem's already told us, right? What do you need a spy for if you have God on your side? It's like you already know what's going to happen. But nevertheless, as we find, the Jews were not so, weren't able to actualize their faith. And because of that, there was some very large ramifications. They send these spies in, and we'll see in the story that the spies come back with a very sad story, that we're not going to be able to succeed. We're going to go into the land of Israel. The people are giants, right? So the people will destroy us. The land itself is destructive. It eats its inhabitants, it says. Right? Everything in the land is enormous. That is big, and we don't know what we're going to do. The cities are fortified, and so they're very concerned. Right? And they go back and they tell the Jewish people, and the Jewish people will become despondent. They give up all hope. Right? It says that they dug graves, and they laid in the graves, and they said, "Well, God, why don't you just kill us here, so that we don't have to go through this whole war in the land of Israel, but we're going to lose anyways. Might as well just end it now." And it says that because the Jews acted in this way, it teaches us a number of things, but one was that because of it, from then on that day, that very day that the spies came back and gave their report, and all the Jews lost hope, that day was Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, which became a day of hopelessness for the Jewish people throughout history. Not that we really were hopeless, we're never really hopeless, but it's a day that is as close as it could be. So now when we read the Parsha, we're going to fill in all of the pieces to be able to see what we just said. So it begins by saying that Hashem says to Moshe, Shlach lecha anashim. He tells him a command. Send men vayasuru es aretz, so they can tour the land. Right? The word, right, suru is to tour. It also means to spy out. Right? Go there and they're going to check out what's going on. Right? So here it appears that God is telling Moshe to send spies. So it doesn't seem to be what we originally thought, or I said, which was the Jewish people were what we call had a little bit of faith. They didn't have enough faith to do this, so they went to God and asked Him. It seems that the Torah just begins by God answering, and that's exactly the case. This is God's response. The question that they asked, we want to have spies to go in, so we should be ready militarily to fight whoever's in the land. That was the question. God doesn't even need to put the question down. We understand the question. The answer He gives is He tells Moshe, okay, you win. You want spies, I'll let you have spies. So send in these spies to check out the land of Canaan, Asher ani nosin livnei Yisrael, which I will give to the Jewish people. Ish echad lamata avosav tishlechu kol nesiya v'hem. And he says that each one, based on the tribe that they come from, you are going to send one leader from every tribe to be a spy. They'll have 12 tribes, they have 12 spies. Right? And that's exactly what happened. In fact, by virtue of the fact that God uses the word anashim for men, anashim does not really mean man. It means man of dignity. I mean, a dignified person. Like, instead of calling someone a guy, or hey you call him sir. Right? It means something. Here God is using that word in order to say, you're not going to just send anybody. I want you to send the 12 greatest members of the Jewish people, one from each tribe, who are going to go and they're going to scout out the land. The idea being, of course, that these are the 12 most powerful, most righteous, greatest leaders of the Jewish people. They're going to come back with the right message, right? It's not going to be a problem. In fact, we know they don't come back with the right message, and it's a great point of a problem for the Jewish people. No, we'll get to that. So he tells them to send them out. Vayishlach osam Moshe BaMidbar, and Moshe sends them al pi Hashem, by the word of God. Kulam anashim, they were all these dignified men. Roshei b'nei Yisrael hema, they were the heads of tribes. Ve'elu shmosam, and then it goes through all of their names. Now we learn later that these 12 spies go into the land of Israel. 10 of them go in and come back with a negative report. 2 of them come back with a positive report. The ones with the positive report are Yehoshua ben Nun, and Caleb ben Yefuneh. Yehoshua ben Nun becomes the next leader of the Jewish people after Moshe dies. That doesn't happen for a while yet, about 4 decades later. But he's nevertheless is a great leader. And Caleb ben Yefuneh is a brother-in-law, Moshe, married to Miriam, right, Moshe's sister. He's also a great leader. So these 2 come back with the right message, while everybody else comes back with the wrong message. Now, it tells us at the end of this piece, where it talks about how he sends them all out, it says that Moshe changes the name of Yoshua. If you look here, it's like in verse 15 and 16. The 16 it says, "These are the names of the men whom Moshe sent to spy out the land." So it just told us all of the names of the men. Then it says, "And Moshe called Hoshea ben Nun Yehoshua." He changed his name from Hoshea to Yehoshua. The change is just adding 1 letter. And if you look in the Hebrew, he adds a yud at the beginning of his name, and then because of it, it grammatically changes from Hoshea to Yehoshua. What's the difference? So there's a medrash that says that whenever a name is changed or a letter is added or taken off, that letter has to be found somewhere. Like, you can't just invent letters. So when God had Moshe change the name of Yoshua, so where did he get the letter from? Where did the yud come from? Of course, this is speaking metaphorically. Where did he get the yud? It says he got it from the name of Sarah, because Sarah's original name was Sari, which meant my princess. She was the princess of Abraham, of his nation. But then later, Abraham became father of many nations, so Sarah's name had to be changed from my princess to the princess, Sarah, because she was the princess to the world. So therefore, the yud is taken away from her name. Sari becomes Sarah. No more, right? So where does that yud go? So it says it travels around in space until Yehoshua's name is changed by Moshe, and he's given the yud. So what's the meaning behind that? What is? There must be a relationship between Sarah and Yehoshua, right? That the name should go. So the commentaries tell us the following: why does Yehoshua get his name changed? Because Moshe saw that it's going to be hard for him to stand up to everybody. Here he's going into the land. You're getting the most powerful leaders of the Jewish people to go into the land. Moshe was afraid that they are not going to come back with a positive report. He needs Yehoshua to do so. He is his student. He is his number 2 man. He's his right-hand man. So he gives him a blessing that he should, by changing his name to Yehoshua, right, rather than Hoshea. So so how does this apply to Sarah? If we know Sarah, right, she went and she couldn't have a child, and so she tells her husband, "Take my concubine, take my maidservant," like she had an assistant, a helper, and marry her, and have a child with her, and I'll raise the child. So he goes, he takes her, and he marries her, and he has relations. They have a baby. That's Yishmael, and eventually Sarah tells Abraham, "You have to send Yishmael and his mother away." Now, this is not an easy thing for Abraham, but it's not an easy thing from Sarah either, because, here she was behind the whole thing. She says, "Take my maidservant and I'll raise the child." And then she goes and she sees that when she does have a child later, which is Yitzchak, that Yishmael is a problem. So she wants to send him away. Avram, we know from the personality that we know of Avram, does not want to send him away. Avram is welcoming, he's understanding, he's caring, he's sensitive to the feelings of others, and here they're taking a little child and his mother and sending them into the desert, so a good chance they'll die. At the very least, they'll lose their entire sort of future of being a part of Abraham's people. Right? So Abraham doesn't want it, and Sarah stands up to him, and finally to the point that God says, whatever Sarah says, he tells Abraham, do it. Sarah knows better. All right? But you can imagine the amount of strength, the fortitude she had to do this. So it says that that's exactly why the Yud came from her name. Because Yehoshua had to now go with 11 other people, of which 10 of them we know came back with very negative impressions of Israel. And the reason they came back with it was because they went there with it. Right? They saw what they wanted to see. They were afraid that we're going to take over the land of Israel, and it's not going to be easy, and they're going to kill us, and they're going to hurt us, and they're going to have a big war, and the land itself is difficult. They saw what they wanted to see. But Moshe had to make sure that Yeshua had the fortitude and the inner strength to stand up to them and to say, you're wrong. The land of Israel, we can conquer it. God gave it to us. It's our land. So the ability for him to do that, he got from Sarah. Because Sarah did the same thing with Abraham. That's why it says that he got the Yud from Sarah's name was given to Yeshua. That's the idea. So that's what happens here, that he's given that name. All right, and then it says he sends them out to be the spies. And if we follow along, we look on page 800, right, starting with verse Chaf Aleph 21. So in the English it says, they went up and spied out the land, from the wilderness of Zin to the expanse of the approach of Hamas. They ascended in the south and arrived at Hebron, where they were, and it goes through all of these things. Now it says that the other one of the spies who worked together with Yoshua was Kalev, and it says that Kalev is why they went to Hebron. They went to Hebron so Kalev would pray at the grave of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right? He would go there and pray that God should help him stand up and have the right report. So that's how both Yoshua and Kalev were able to do that. So they went and came, right, and then they brought back the report to them and the entire assembly, and they showed them the fruit of the land. So now they come back and they're telling everybody what they saw, and they bring back this giant fruit. You ever see the symbol for the Ministry of Tourism in Israel? The symbol is a man in the front, a man in the back, and they're holding two poles, and on the poles is a giant bunch of grapes, and the bunch of grapes are as big as the men. Right? You seen that? That's from this. They came back from Israel with enormous fruit. They said, "Look at these grapes! Like they're the size of basketballs." Right? And they were amazed by it. They brought that back, and it says that they brought back the fruit of the land. Then it says, and they reported Vayisperhu, and they told him the story of Yomru Banu El Haaretz. We went to the land Asher Shalchtanu that you sent us to. And it continues, and it has milk and honey, and this is the fruit. So they start out by saying something very nice about Israel. Israel is flowing with good things. The people that dwell in the land are powerful. Now they're getting into what they're going to tell you. Right? The cities are fortified and very great. We also saw there the offspring of the giant. Amalek dwells in the south, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell on the mountain, Canaanites dwell by the sea, and Caleb then goes, no, we're going to go up, we're going to conquer it, don't worry about it. So as I said, Caleb and Yeshua are standing by it. Now what is it that we see here is that they went in with a preconceived notion. Why? Why would these 10 men who were great leaders of the Jewish people, they were the heads of the tribes of the Jewish people, why would they do that? Like, why would they go to Israel and then come back with a negative report? And we know they came back with a negative report because they went in with a negative feeling. They were already sure we're going to fail. So then they found what they thought they were going to find, which is very, very common in and of itself. That's a point of human nature, to realize that if you have a preconceived notion about something, very often you try to prove it, right? So you have a newspaper, for instance. The newspaper is conservative. Everything they do will be to either disprove the liberals or to prove conservative. Why? Because they already have a preconceived notion. They want conservative to win. So whatever happens, they spin it in a way that fits them. That's what these guys were doing. But why did they do it? What did they want? They wanted to live in the desert the rest of their life? They didn't want the land of Israel that God promised them, that they left Egypt for? So it says that actually, in some sense, they didn't. They understood that in the desert, we're big shots. We're the heads of tribes, and we're living in a spiritual world. How did they get food in the desert? Came from heaven. Right? How did they get clothes? Their clothes never wore out. How about when they got bigger? The little kids grew up over all the years in the desert. The clothes grew with them. How did they have shade? God provided shade. Water, He provided water. He had everything. Right? It's like, you get a 18-year-old boy, graduates high school, he wants to go to Israel to study in yeshiva. Right? For him, it's like being in the Garden of Eden. He doesn't have to pay for anything. His father gives him a credit card for his expenses. He pays for his tuition and his food and his room to sleep in. Right? That's all done. All he's got to do is worry about studying. That's all he's got to do. He has no worries in the world. So if you consider that learning Torah is important, which it is, but if you consider that very important and something that you want to do, you're in the Garden of Eden. You don't have to work. You don't have to prepare your own food. You don't have to buy anything. All you got to do is study Torah all day, and everything's provided to you. Your bed's there at night. Your breakfast is on the table. Right? You're living in a dormitory. All the food is there. Everything you need. So it's a wonderful life. That's what they had. They're in the desert. They were the leaders of the Jewish people, so they were famous. Next thing is they wanted to have a spiritual life. So they lived their life spiritually. They didn't have to go to work to get money for bread. They didn't have to go to work to pay for insurance. They didn't need to pay for air conditioning. Everything was provided for them by God in a spiritual sense and a physical sense. And therefore, they wanted it to stay that way. And they knew when they went to the land of Israel that they're going to become farmers. They're going to plow the ground. They're going to plant seeds. They're going to grow things. It's hard work. And therefore, some of the commentators say that they went out of their way to be disparaging about the land of Israel because they realized that they would no longer have the same abilities to accomplish so much spiritually. In fact, there are some of the commentators that say that they believed, like I say most religions believe other than ours, which is that the whole idea of the physical world is here to take you away from the spiritual world. So if we go to the land of Israel, we conquer it, we're landlords. It's our country now. We got to take care of it. We got to build roads. We got to take care of the taxes. We got to do all these things, right? That's so physical. It takes me away from my spiritual life of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. So that was their idea. So therefore, we're going to make it so we don't go to Israel. But they're wrong, because not only are they wrong in their first point, which is that they were prepared to give up the land of Israel so they could keep their jobs, right, as being the heads of tribes, but also that they felt that the physical world, right, was bad. They wanted the spiritual world. They just wanted to be in the desert, no worries, no nothing, like the 18-year-old boy in yeshiva. God's giving them free food. God's taking care of them. They don't have to worry about anything. Right? That's how we want to be. That's what they said. And God says, no, that's not how you do it. You have to be involved in the physical world. You have to know how the physical world works. You have to work. You have to do things in the physical world. That you have to do. And it doesn't take you away from Torah. It brings you Torah. Right? It brings you the ability to perform Torah. And so this was the whole point of why God wanted us to go to the land of Israel. And their point was, if we go to the land of Israel, we won't be spiritual anymore. We'll be physical. We'll be digging dishes. From early in the morning to late at night, we'll be plowing fields. That's not spiritual. So God is telling him that is spiritual. Spirituality is by using the physical world for a greater purpose. And that's what it basically is. What's the difference if you take a cow and you shech the cow and you go and you make hamburger? If I take the hamburger from this cow and I sell it to McDonald's, and anybody who wants to go and buy an unkosher hamburger there, Jewish, not Jewish, whatever, they can go there and buy it. Right? Another one, they slaughter the cow, take the meat, I bring it together, and I invite 20 people to my home. 5 of them are poor people who can't afford meat. 15 of them are coming to celebrate that we just finished learning a book of Talmud. Right? That's why we're doing it. Right? So I'm taking this meat and I'm elevating it. It's now as a spiritual ability. Right? It becomes something more. It helps me become spiritual. Because when I eat the meat as a part of my celebration over learning Torah, if I eat the meat as a part of giving poor people food, so then I'm doing a very spiritual thing. The rest of the world says, no, money is evil. You can't. Money's not going to bring you spirituality. Money is going to take you away from spirituality. If you have money, money is going to make you only think of yourself. Right? So you shouldn't have money. That's what the world says around us. That's why the world around us has vows of poverty. That's why the spiritual people. That's why they don't get married and have relations. It's physical, draws you down. Intimacy draws you down. That's why they don't have children. That's why they don't work. They don't have regular jobs. Why? Because you can't do those things and be spiritual. You have to sit on a mountain in the Andes and contemplate the universe, and you'll be spiritual. We say that's not how it works. And that's where we get this. The spies made that mistake. The spies said, we want to stay in the desert forever. We want a spiritual life with no physical involvement. And the rest of the Jews said, no, you're wrong. A higher level of spiritual involvement comes from being involved in the physical world. If you imagine you have a next door neighbor, and God forbid, let's say you have a husband and wife there, and they're getting a bit older, and the husband, God forbid, has a stroke. Now he can't take care of his yard. So you go take care of his yard. Right? That's a physical thing. You cut his grass, plant his tomatoes, whatever it is. You're doing it. Right? How is that spiritual? Well, we know that that's very spiritual. You're helping somebody. The guy won't have food. The guy has no dignity. And you're coming and making him feel good, and you're making sure that he has food. Right? That's spiritual. And that was the argument here. They wanted to have a totally, esoteric spiritual life, and we said that's not how you are spiritual. And that's really why the pasuk, the whole section deals with this, and that's why they did it. Right? Now you can actually see in the words how they had a preconceived notion, and they saw what they thought they'd see. For instance, if we look at verse 31 in the Hebrew, maybe it's 30. 1 second. Oh, let's see. I'll have to find the exact place where it has the word. But there's one point where they come in. Oh, here it is. It's in 28. It says right at the top of the page in 802. It says, it's a land of zavas chalav udavash, a land flowing with milk and honey. Hu v'zeh piriah, and this is the fruit. Then it says, Ephes ki az ha'am hayoshe ba'aretz. But the people who live there are very strong. Right? Israel, they have great fruit there. But you're not going to get any of it because the nation that's there are tough guys, and they're going to kill us when we go in. But the word here is, they translate it as but. So but can be B-U-T, can have more than one word. Usually you have the word aval, which means but. Right? You have this, but that. And then you have the word ephes. Ephes really means nothing. It's zero. That's what it means, the word zero. But it's used to mean but also. That means all of this means nothing because of the following. All of this beautiful fruit means nothing because the people are so strong, we're not going to get any of the fruit. Right? So it's the same thing as but it has a connotation of negativity. When you say aval, it can be positive or it can be nondescript. But if you say ephes, you're making a negative statement. It means but, it's not like usual but, it's but in a negative way. And that's what they're saying here. They use the word but they use that word. They're saying, oh, the land of Israel is so beautiful. And there's such beautiful fruit. And it's flowing with milk and honey. But, they're tough there. That's not how they said it. They said, the land is flowing with milk and honey, but it's a waste of time. We're not going to get it. They're strong. Right? That's what it's saying. You can see this in how the words are written, that they had a preconceived notion. Right? In fact, it tells us how they went in there, and it says that, the Medrash says that when they went in, Hashem wanted to make it that the spies wouldn't get caught. Right? If they get caught, it's like they're sort of in trouble. So what he did is there were a lot of sick people who among the Canaanites. So he had them die, so that people were going to funerals. They were going to 3, 4, 5 funerals a day. They were too busy going to funerals to notice a couple of guys who they didn't recognize wandering the streets. So he did it on purpose. But the people themselves, the spies themselves, they, as I said, they had a preconceived notion that this is going to be bad. So when God made it so that they would be hidden by making funerals all the time, what did they say? They said, the land eats the dead. The land here kills people. You should see how many funerals there are. We were there for a week, and there was 4 funerals a day. Right? Everyone's going to funerals all the time. It's a terrible place. How could you live in a place like that? Right? That's what they came back and said. But that was not what happened. What happened was that God purposely did it. And how do you know that that was their, again, how that was their feeling and that's why it came out that way? Because it's not logical. Imagine this. I have a land where all the people who live in the land, it's dangerous to live there. And 5, 6 people die every day, right? Because it's so dangerous to live here, right? And they have to make funerals. Now, you tell me, if any one of us, God forbid, were living in a place where there were 5 or 6 funerals a day, right? And this is going on as long as you're alive, since the time you're a kid, right? This is the land. The land does this. So now you're an old person, and you've been going through 90 years of this, right? So, would you be going to 5 funerals a day? Probably not. You're sick of it. There's 5 funerals every day. It's one thing if you happen to know the people and it's a horrible thing, so many funerals in one day. This is so many funerals every day. So the fact that everybody went to the funerals, right, which was what God wanted, so that they wouldn't notice the spies. So all of the people, all the Canaanites are going to the funerals. It had to tell the spies that this is not normal. Because if so many people died every day, everyone wouldn't be going to funerals all the time. They couldn't do anything else. Every day you have 5 funerals. You can't go to work. You can't take care of your kids. You can't go shopping. You can't do nothing. You're going to funerals all day. And the whole time they're there, everyone's going to funerals. So that should have said to them, this is not normal. It's not normal that everybody's doing this. Because if everyone was doing this every day, you wouldn't go to funerals. The fact that they're going to funerals means that people don't usually die to that extent. That really was the significance of how you can tell that they had a preconceived notion. Whatever they saw it badly. So they saw, right, like I said, they saw the people, they're ferocious. And the land itself eats people. Right? It means they die there. Right? They come up with all of these things in order to be able to come back and say, you see, we were right. It's good that you sent us, because we're not going to get that land of Israel. We better find somewhere else to go. Right? That's why it says what it says. And then probably the biggest telltale sign has got to be in verse 33. It says, V'shamar inu es ha-nephilim, and there we saw what they called the Nephilim. The Nephilim were giants. Right? They were it was a type of human. Many commentaries say that it was a human they were from before the flood. Human beings before the flood were very different than human beings after the flood of Noah. And one of the things was that the human beings before the flood were basically superhuman. They were giants. They were strong. They didn't get sick. Right? It was time for them to die. They just died. They didn't get sick first. They were like superhuman. Right? So there were some of them who had survived through the flood, and they're living there. So you have these giants, the sons of giants, it says. Right? So listen to this quote. There we saw the Nephilim, the sons of the giant, from among the Nephilim. And then it says, semicolon, we were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so we were in their eyes. So that statement is a very telling statement. Because they said, we like grasshoppers in our eyes. We see ourselves as grasshoppers, bugs, compared to these giants, just like they saw us. And their point, that was exactly the idea. They believed that they were insignificant. They believed that they were weak. They believed that they're not going to be able to conquer the land of Israel. And not only did they believe it, that they were grasshoppers, but they projected their feeling on the others, and to the people who lived there. Not only were we grasshoppers in our eyes, but we were grasshoppers in their eyes as well. And that's what it says. How does he know? Because he presumes it. If a person thinks they're a nobody, then the world sees them as a nobody. And that's an important point. We should take a minute to talk about the idea of humility. There's such an idea that the Torah tells us that human beings should be humble. That is to say, that you should not be arrogant. Now, many people misunderstand humility, and they think it means that I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody, I'm a nothing. Right? I'm not worth the air I breathe. That's not being humble. That's being stupid. Because God created us, and He created every one of us with gifts. some of our gifts isn't maybe intelligence, maybe beauty, maybe sophistication, maybe the ability to understand certain things. Whatever it is, we all have gifts. We all have weaknesses. We all have gifts. Right? The fact that we have a gift that could be such strength in that gift that we could be the best one in the world, you can believe you're the best in the world and still be humble, because you don't believe that you're better than someone else. You're better at this than someone else, but you're not a better person. It's a gift. You didn't do it. You woke up, right? You have the ability to paint. You have the ability to draw, let's say. So you work on it, you can draw better. But if a person gets up and they can't draw at all, they can work all they want. They're not going to become famous artists. God gave them that talent. So if we realize that the talents that we have come from God, and it's our job to perfect those talents, so then we can say, I'm the greatest artist in the world, and that's still humble, because I am the greatest. But it's not because I did it. God gave me that gift. So we have many occasions of this. I know that with Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who died in the early 1980s, they tell a number of stories about him. Like one time being at a wedding, and back then, how did you reach guys in yeshiva or at events? You had to call a payphone. You didn't have a phone. A yeshiva guy in a dorm room didn't have a phone, just like a university kid didn't have a phone. There were no cell phones. Right? There's nothing. So you had to have a payphone at the end of the hall. So everybody's parents would get the number of the payphone, and it would start ringing. And whoever was walking by, they'd answer the phone, and they'd say, "Can I talk to so-and-so?" And you go down to his room and give him the phone, right? That was how it was done back then. You simply had it like that. So it says that Moshe Feinstein was at a wedding, and the phone was ringing in the lobby, because somebody wanted to call one of the boys at the wedding, right? They had no way to reach him other than that. So one of the boys answers the phone and he yells out, "Hey, Moshe, it's a phone call for you." And Rabbi Feinstein's name was Moshe. But he wasn't talking to him, right? He was the greatest rabbi of our time. He was talking to one of his friends. But Rabbi Feinstein thought he was talking to me, so he came over to take the phone. But because he was humble. He didn't think he was somebody who could not be a normal person, even though he was the greatest mind of the generation, the greatest rabbi of the time. Nevertheless, that's what he thought. On the other hand, there's another story about him that shows another trait, which is that somebody asked him a question, and as they're asking him the question, they keep questioning his answer. And then, somebody comes to you, they ask you a question in your area of expertise, and then they don't believe you, so they start asking you a question about your answer, and then another question about your answer. Well, sooner or later you get sick of it, right? So it says that Rav Moshe Feinstein this guy comes to him and asks him a question, then he starts asking you a question on the answer, and then a question on that answer, and a question on that answer. Finally, Rabbi Feinstein says, "Son, do you know who you're talking to? Do you realize who I am? I'm Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. I'm the greatest legal authority in the world." Right? So how could he say that? That's not humble, but it is humble. He doesn't say, "I'm better than you. That you have to treat me special." But I am special. Not because I did it. God gave it to me. I worked on it. But God gave me this gift. I'm not a better person than you. I'm a bigger scholar than you, but you might be a better artist than me. I'm not a better person than you. That's the idea. When we think of ourselves as being humble, we have to realize that it means that you know who you are. If you know who you are, you can be humble. Now it says in the Torah, Moshe was the most humble of all men, right? Moshe wrote that. Now God told him to write it, but he wrote it. So imagine, I'm most humble. It's like saying it's like an oxymoron. How can I say I'm the most humble of all people? By definition, if I say I'm the most humble, then I'm not very humble. But the fact is, you are. That is humility. Humility is knowing who you are. Now that you know who you are, and you can express who you are, and you can believe who you are, but you can't consider yourself better than somebody else. Because they also can know who they are, and they also have strengths, they also have weaknesses, they also have things about them that I can't do. Right? Because that comes from God. And we work on what God gives us, but that's humility. Humility is not, I'm a nothing, I'm a nobody, I'm going to sit in the corner and cry. Right? That's not the idea. Because you know who you are. And that's what it's telling us, in these occasions, that, they were great people. They were great people, right? But they saw themselves as grasshoppers. If you're a great person and you think that humility means I'm a bug, I'm a nobody, then that's how the world will see you. They'll see you like that. So if you should say, in our eyes, we're like grasshoppers, so of course in their eyes, we're like grasshoppers. Right? I remember one time, I think it was Rabbi, maybe it was Shamir. I don't know, there was a war going on, and he quoted this quote, and he said that we are like grasshoppers in our eyes as we are in their eyes. It was talking something to do with the Palestinians, and they translated it to say that he was calling them bugs. Right? He says that they're bugs. Like, in other words, they're not human. That's not what he meant at all. He was saying how they've advanced so far militarily from the 6-Day War, where we could look cross-eyed at an Egyptian and he would give up. I mean, now they're well trained. They know what they're doing. Like, that's what he meant. So, we're like grasshoppers compared to them. The only way we're going to win this war is because God wants us to win this war. But to them, we're like grasshoppers. We might have been, we might not have been, but that was his point. It was the same. They quoted that, and of course, the media purposely misquoted it and took it out of context and said that he's calling the Palestinians bugs, which he wasn't doing, at least not then. So now, if we get to the chapter 14 on the bottom of 802 and 803, we now see what happens when they came back. The entire assembly raised up an issue's voice. The people wept that night. All the children of Israel murmured against Moshe and Aaron, and the entire assembly said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. Why is Hashem bringing us to this land to die by the sword? Our wives and young children will be taken captive. Is it not better for us to return to Egypt? Then they start yelling, let us appoint a leader and go back to Egypt. So what do? Moshe and Aaron, they fall on their faces, it says. Because they're totally can't believe it of what's going on. And then Yeshua speaks and sort of saves the day. What happens basically is the spies come back with their report. The people were sort of anticipating this. They accept it as being true. And now the people want to go back to Egypt. Like what? God took us out of Egypt so that we could die in the desert? Well, let's die in Egypt. What do we need this for? They forgot. So there's one of the interesting messages is how a person can persevere in a very difficult situation, but very often when you look back on it, you don't see it. Like we all talk about the good old days, how things were so great in the old days, but when you were living those days, you didn't think it was the good old days. You think it was just a regular day. Right? We look back on history in such a way, and that's how we see things. That's what they were doing here. They were saying in Egypt that things were great. Right? They gave us free food in Egypt. Of course they gave you free food, because you were slaves. They didn't get paid for your work. They fed you so you could work the next day. It's not a good thing that they didn't pay you, and that the food was free. Right? But we go back to Egypt, at least, we won't starve to death. Out here, we're going to get killed. So better we should go back to Egypt. It's a total misunderstanding of history that they themselves experienced because of their preconceived notions. So then Hashem says, I'm going to take you out, I'm going to bring you into the land. But at this point, God curses the Jewish people that they will be in the desert for 40 years. At this point, they're not in the desert for 2 years. And now they have to go for 40 years because of what happened. Because God does not want any of the people who left Egypt and mourned that they weren't going to get into Israel to enter the land. They all had to die first. Not that he killed them first, they had to die. So he waited until they died, and then he brought the Jews into the land. That took 40 years. That's why they were in the desert for 40 years, because of this story. And by the way, it was only the men. The men are the ones who were despondent, and the men were the ones who rebelled, and the men are the ones who were not allowed to go into the land of Israel if they were alive at this point. But the women, on the other hand, were not despondent, did not give up hope, and stayed alive during the entire 40 years and were able to enter the land of Israel. They might have been widows, they might have been orphans, but they were able to do it because the women never gave up hope. That's one thing we see over and over again in the Torah, is that when it comes to what we call bitachon, see, there's two words for faith. If I understand it correctly, you have amunah, which means faith, and you have bitachon, which really means, in my mind, actualized faith. That is, one of them is intellectual. I have faith that the Mashiach will come. I have faith in that. Right? That's intellectual. I've studied it, I've read it, I believe in the Torah, so I now have an intellectual decision that Mashiach is coming. Right? That's one level of understanding. Another level of understanding is experiencing it. Right? You experience it. It's a higher level than just believing. I know it to be true. Right? Right. When a person goes through that, here, as they're going in the desert, they're experiencing this entire situation, and they're getting themselves stuck because they're afraid they're not going to be able to go to the land of Israel, and they're going to get destroyed. Their faith has not been actualized. They might have believed in God, and they saw that they came out of Egypt. They saw the 10 plagues. And they saw the giving of the Torah. They saw the splitting of the sea. They were all there. So their faith was enormous, but their actualized faith, what we call bitachon, faith in action, was not so big. That was where their problem was. Intellectually, they could understand that God is here to save us, but when it got down to the nuts and bolts of Him actually doing it, then they started to waver. That's bitachon is what was missing, and because of it, they were cursed to 40 years in the desert, because they said we can't allow someone to come into the land of Israel who has no understanding of what the greatness is going to be there. So God made it so that they died in the desert. And that's why it tells us what it tells us.
So that's why God must have been very pleased with the War of Independence in Israel, the first one, after the declaring that the state would be, because there was
there's certainly an argument among the Jewish leaders to the extent, but I think that you're right. I think that is a positive step forward.
Yes.
Right?
There's minimum hope, and the British supported the Arabs, and it was a marvelous time.
That's right. So now the next few pages talks about the problems that came out, and then up in the bottom of 808 and 809, it says, "But as for the men whom Moshe sent to spy out the land, and who returned and provoked the entire assembly against them by spreading a report against the land, the people who spread the evil report about the land died in a plague. But Yoshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Yefuneh lived from among those men who were going to spy out the land." Right, they're the only two who lived, because they're the two who came back and gave positive reports. "And Moses spoke these words to all the children of Israel," as we just went through. "They awoke early in the morning, and they went to the mountain. We're ready. We want to go up to where Hashem said." Now what happens? The Jewish people, a minute ago, right, or a day ago, they're not going anywhere. Right? You tell us we're going to Israel? Well, those people in Israel, they're giants. They're going to kill us. And if we even get past them, the land itself will kill us. We can't live there, right? We're going to die. So then finally, they see the truth. Because the people who came back with the bad words died. They died in a plague. The ones who came back with positive reports stayed alive, right, from God. So the people say, wait a minute, we are going to be successful. We are going to go to the land of Israel. So they said they got up in the morning, right, and they go towards the mountain, and they say, we're ready, let's go. We're going to Israel. So Moses says, hold on a minute. There are ramifications to what you did. You said God couldn't do it, that we're going to be stuck, we're going to get killed. Now you change your mind? There's ramifications for what you did. So he says, why do you transgress the word of Hashem? It will not succeed. Do not ascend, for Hashem is not in your midst. Right? The people are saying, no, we're going to the land of Israel now. That's it. We're going. God says that we should go. We're going. He says, no. Moses says, don't go. Don't do it. God didn't tell you to go. And don't be, because if you go, you will be killed. Because God does not want you to go now. Right? That's how the Jews were. That's how people are. People get, like, when I was growing up in the United States, nobody was patriotic. You had the Vietnam War going on. You had, Nixon and Watergate. You had all types of things going on that took away your trust in the government, right? And really made you feel that the government was against you. They were out for themselves. They weren't out for the betterment of the people. They were out for themselves. And we had these very strong feelings. Nobody was patriotic. Right? Along comes 9/11. Suddenly, like, every American is ready to go fight in Afghanistan. Everybody's ready to go. What's the difference? The attitude changed. People's attitude, they became patriotic. They attacked us on our land. No one ever did that before. Now we're going to show them. So now they all became patriotic and ready to go fight. When I was a kid, everybody left and went to Canada. They didn't want to fight. Right? And now that people are trying to join. Like my daughter got married, so her husband's father is a military. He's in the military, but he's already older. But he said that on 9/11 he went back to the army and he said, I want to go back. And he was like in his 60s already, right? And they almost let him. He told me that he was this. If his rank was off by one thing, they would have taken him. They had too many of his rank. And he was in his 60s, right? He's of the age. Now I can't talk about him back then. I don't know him, but that he could have been the draft deserter in Vietnam, and now he's going and offering to fight in Afghanistan. I have no reason to think that he did that, but I know he offered to fight. Why? Because things change. Right? The atmosphere changes. Suddenly, people are ready to give up their life. Before they're ready to run away, now they're going to give up their life. That's what happens here. Here they say, we're not going to Israel. Are you crazy? Right? God, we can't fight those people. We're like grasshoppers compared to them. They're going to kill us. Right? And then Moshe shows them that they're wrong. So they say, okay, we're going now. Right? We're not waiting for God. We're going now. Right? That's it. Right? And God says, oh no. Moshe tells them. God said, you go now. You're going to die. You go when God tells you to go. God told you to go before. You said no. Now you want to go because we proved it to you? Well, God says no. When He says yes, you can go. Yeah.
Rabbi, I wanted to ask you, isn't it human nature to not want to take risks? You know, like some people are so afraid of making decisions, so they don't want to do it.
Yes, but we do it. For instance, there are things in all of our lives that we're prepared to give up our life for. Now you'd say, like, let's be logical. Why would you give up your life for anything? Would you give up your life for your country, for freedom? Would you give up your life for your religion? How about for your children, your husband? But people, I know that I'm going to hit you. You're going to say yes sooner or later. But that's your life, right? It's your whole life. Because when something is important to you, right, you're prepared to sacrifice for that. That's what's happened here. The land of Israel was always important to them, but they were afraid. You imagine, they were slaves just a year ago. And suddenly they become this powerful nation, but they still have slave mentality in their heads. They're still slaves sometimes. And now you're telling us we're going to take over this land. We're going to conquer a nation, right? Well, our experience is we open the New York Times in the desert and we see this country attacks that country and they lose. We're not going to necessarily win, right? So they were afraid. But suddenly now the spirit changed. Now we're not going to lose. We're going, and we're going now. And that's when Moshe says, no, you don't go when you want to go. You go when God tells you to go. Right? And that's what he stops them here. Now, interestingly enough, there's, just for time's sake, I just want to get to the end. If we look at we're skipping a whole bunch of stuff, but if we look at the end of, on page 816 and 817, the last section, and we read it as the maftir, it talks about the mitzvah of tzitzit. Right? Speak to the children of Israel and say to them that they shall make themselves tzitzit on the corner of their garments throughout their generations, and they should place on the tzitzit a thread of turquoise wool. It shall constitute tzitzit for you, that you may see it and remember all the commandments of Hashem. Now, if you look at the words here, we say these words in Shema. It says, V'lo sasuru acharei levavchem v'acharei nechem. Why do you wear tzitzit? So you should remember all the mitzvahs, and you should not go after your heart and your eyes. Right? That's what it says. But the word here is sasuru, is to go after. It's the same word I said at the beginning. Remember I said to tour? Suras Haaretz, that there's like touring. They went into the land of Israel. God wanted them to, they could go spy. So he says they would go out to spy the land. They go out to see the land. And the same word's used here. Right? At the beginning of the parsha you have the word, at the end of the parsha you have the word. At the beginning of the parsha it's used for something negative. Right? To spies who are going to fail. Here it's used for something, it's also a negative, but it's in a positive connotation, which is the mitzvah of tzitzis. So what is going on? And here's an interesting point with it. It says here, why do you wear tzitzis? So you should not go after your heart and after your eyes. That is to sin, right? In fact, if you read Rashi says a person sees something, right, that he shouldn't have, and he wants it. right? So the tzitzis stop you from doing that. So you shouldn't go after your heart and your eyes. But if you listen to what I said closely, there's a problem, because Rashi says a person sees it and he wants it. The Torah says after your heart and after your eyes. That means you want it and then you see it, right? You see it and then you want it, right? Because your heart doesn't see, your heart feels, right? You want something and then your eyes see it, and they're saying to us that the idea is that if a person wants to sin, they'll be able to sin. And if a person doesn't want to sin, chances are they won't. So if you want to do something wrong, the opportunity will find itself. Right? If you don't, it'll be harder to happen. That's why, because if your heart wants to do something wrong, your eyes will find it. Right? If you're in your heart, you say you have a guy, let's say, and he's a womanizer. It's not that he sees women and then he wants them. He wants them, so he sees them in that way. That's how he sees them. The same man sees a woman, doesn't see her as a sex object, but he does, right? Because his heart is telling him what to see. Just like their spies went, their heart said, we're not going to make it. So their eyes saw, we're not going to make it. But the two spies who were positive, they said, we're going to make it, and their eyes saw, we're going to make it. So here you have the same idea. Here it says, why it says after your heart and after your eyes, because it's what you see is based on what you want. If you want a spiritual life, if you want a life of goodness, if that's really what you want, you will see opportunity after opportunity to do it. If you don't, then you'll see opportunity for what it is you do want, right? Constantly, and whatever it is that you want. So with the spies, it was a negative. With the tzitzis, fights that. We wear tzitzis so that we fight the idea that if our heart wants to do something negative, that our eyes will do it. So you will not go after your heart and after your eyes. That's what it tells us. That's why they use the same word to draw a correlation between the beginning of the parsha and the end, both of them dealing with the idea of seeing and hearing, right? Seeing and feeling, because of how it works. Also, if you look, of course, here, it's a famous quote for those, when you say the Shema, if you see it's lo sasuru achrei levavchem, you should not go after your eyes, v'achrei einechem, and after your heart and after your eyes. But heart and eyes are both in the plural. So eyes is logical. You have two eyes, right? You have two eyes. So of course, don't go after your eyes. I don't say don't go after your eye. Go after your eyes. But you only have one heart. So why is heart in plural? Right? That's all the commentaries want to know that. Why is it say? Because you only have one heart. So the Talmud answers. The Talmud says because we have more than one heart. We have what's called inclinations, desires. We have good desires and bad desires. Those are our, because what does it mean, our heart? It doesn't mean your physical heart. Don't go after your heart. How can you go after your heart? Your heart's inside of you. Right? It means, what does your heart manifest? It manifests into your desire. This is what I want. My heart is telling me to be with this person. My heart is telling me I'm in love. My heart is leading me in this direction, right? My heart, my heart, my heart. So in that way, we have two hearts. We have what's called the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. We have an inclination to do wrong. As I say, I want to do what I want to do, and I want to do it now. That's your evil inclination. The evil inclination wants to feel good and wants to feel good now. It makes no difference what it costs. If it means I want to feel good now, if it means I'm going to lose my wife because of it, I will. I want to feel good now. Right? She's not here, so there's another woman here. But it's going to cost me. Too bad. Right? I want it now. That's our evil inclination. Our good inclination is I would like to do the right thing. I want to do the right thing. So if I have a dilemma between I'm hungry, right? I only have so much money, and I have an opportunity to eat kosher and non-kosher. Non-kosher is cheaper, and it's more prevalent. I can get a non-kosher sandwich in about 30 seconds, and then I get a kosher sandwich for more money in 15 minutes. So if I want to eat, and I want to eat now, my Yetzer Hara says, you want to eat now. Get the unkosher food. If I say, my Yetzer Tov says, I want to do the right thing. What's the right thing? To go out of my way to get the kosher food. Right? That's and that's your two hearts. So here it's saying you should not go after your hearts. So what's wrong with going after your good inclination? What's wrong with that? Right? I should say don't go after your negative, but don't go after the positive either. Right? So here it means that what appears to be good can sometimes not be good. And what appears to be bad sometimes is not bad. You have to be able to understand your inclination. For instance, a common thing with yeshiva guys is that they'll get all excited. They'll want to learn Torah. So that they'll have the Yetzer Hara, the negative inclination, will say to them, stay up tonight and learn Torah till like 2 in the morning. You're really on a you're on a surge here. You're going to learn Torah not till 10 o'clock. Stay till 2 o'clock in the morning. And why? Why is that negative? Because you're not going to get up in the morning. You're going to miss services. You're going to miss the class that you're supposed to take, right? All because you were so religious you stayed up till 2 in the morning learning Torah. So your Yetzer Hara, your negative inclination, is what we call a frum Yetzer Hara. It tricked you into doing, right, something that's not ultimately not good for you, because you wanted to be a big shot and learn an extra 3 hours tonight, but because you did that, you're going to lose 5 hours tomorrow. You end up losing. So who wins? The Yetzer Hara wins. The negative inclination wins. You were tricked, right? So sometimes the negative inclination looks like positive, and sometimes the positive looks like negative, and you have to know which it is. That's why it says don't go after your hearts, and then it says don't go after your eyes, because if your heart wants to do something wrong, your eyes will find it, and that's why it says it the way it does.
It says here with the tzitzit that there's that turquoise.
Yeah. The original tzitzit had what we call techeles. Techeles is a sky blue, almost purple string. Mm-hmm. There are some people who wear them today. They're not sure that that's the right ones. We're pretty sure that it came from a certain snail, this color, and it was used by royalty in Roman times. We've used it ourselves in our tzitzit, and it adds this royal color. It says it looked like the sky, it looked like the ocean, right? It was this royal blue, and we've lost because of it. We were being persecuted so much. We lost the knowledge of how to make that color. So the mitzvah tzitzit still applies even without the color. It's preferred with it. So how do the people wear this blue? You see people who have it, and that's because there are some people who have a tradition, or they've studied. People have studied it. They've come up with the knowledge that there is that this is most likely the right one. So as the Talmud says, you're not allowed to say that this is definitely the right one. But if you say that this is probably the right one and you want to use it, you're allowed to. It doesn't hurt anything to use it. And if you're right, then you're wearing tzitzit with the blue, which is better. And if you're wrong, then you didn't do anything wrong. The others, people who don't do it, are following a more traditional point of view, because for over 1,000 years we haven't had the color. And my father wore white ones, his father wore white ones, I wear white ones, right? When the Mashiach comes and tells me these are them, or when the leading rabbi at the time says, for sure, this is the blue color, I'll put the blue color in. Until then, I'm not going to do every kind of shtick that people come up with. I'll wait. The other end, those who follow it say this is serious and you have nothing to lose, so do it. So you have both opinions with that. But that's where it comes from. And Talmud has an interesting thing. It says, why do you put blue in your tzitzis? It says because it reminds you of the heavens, right? And it reminds you of the ocean. Right? That it has all of these things. If you look at it, it says that, this is how it says it. It says when you look at the blue, it makes you think of the ocean, and the ocean makes you think of the heavens. Right? The heavens make you think of the chair of God, and the chair of God makes you think of God, and therefore you won't do anything wrong. So why don't you just say, you look at the blue, your tzitzis, it makes you think of God. Well, you got to say, it looks at the ocean, it looks like the sea, it looks like the chair, it looks like that. So it says, because it's a progression. Right? A person should progress slowly. If you attempt to do something wrong, you don't necessarily always take the most drastic approach. Like, if you're sick, you don't immediately get surgery. Right? First thing you do is you got to find out if you can take a pill. Maybe the pill will make you better. Right? You don't. To quote a poet, he said, you don't take. How does it? You don't take a shot of malaria to cure the cold. You don't take an extreme measure. Like, don't go and get surgery as soon as you're sick. Right? Do something less extreme. Right? And that's how we do it. We do things that are less extreme rather than the more extreme. All right? And then that pretty much closes the parsha. So that's our story of Shelach. There's lots more to it, lots more things in it to talk about, but we've sort of used up our time.